Bonjour à tous. Hi everyone, and welcome everyone to our virtual conference on the organic demand in the face of the global trade challenges organized by COTA and EDC. Canada's organic market is valued at 6.6 billion, growing on an average of 8% annually, and is the sixth largest organic market in the world. Organic agriculture has grown by 546% since 1999 globally. So how can organic keep pace with growing organic demand in light of current global trade challenges? Tia Loveguards from COTA teams up with Stephen Tapp from EDC to evaluate the current opportunities given certain trade realities in this issue. Tia Loveguards is the Executive Director of the Canada Organic Trade Association, a member-based, not-for-profit based in Canada, involving the value chain of organic actors in Canada. Tia's background includes founding the first fair trade organic brand in Canada, Camino Chocolate, and other roles with ethical certification landscape as the Business Development Director for Fair Trade Canada and the Chief Operating Officer for Fair Trade America. Tia currently is a voting member of the Organic Standards Technical Committee, the Organic Value Chain Roundtable, and COTA holds leadership positions on several committees and task force that advanced the organic sector market access and resolves regulatory burdens. Tia joined COTA in 2016. She is also very involved in our show, SIAL Canada. She is one of our experts, and she will be available in the expertise, the SIAL expertise hall after the show and during the SIAL Canada virtual show. Tia, it is my pleasure to leave you the floor to introduce Stephen now.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Xavier. And it is our pleasure to put together this forum for everybody today to really highlight the organic demand in the face of global trade challenges. Of course, we were scheduled to deliver this together pre-COVID, and Stefan and I had spoken about teaming up, and we had to change our title because of new global trade challenges, which seemed to have
You didn't get COVID in the title there, Tia.
I did not, but I'm sure we're going to talk all about it. So, so it's our pleasure to co-present today. Stephen Tapp, he is the Deputy Chief Economist with Export Development Canada. And what we're going to do is we're going to kick it off where I kind of set the tone for overarching where organic is at. We've got some new studies and some new numbers to release that we just released here in September. So this conference is very timely. And then Stefan is going to take it more globally and see sort of what the opportunities and or challenges are for the coming years on trade. So let's kick it off. So we did mention already a little bit about our association and what we do, but we're the industry association that focuses on 4 key areas. And you'll notice that market access, so working on sales opportunities, education, so consumer education, government relations, and market research. And today I'm going to present most of our most up-to-date market research. I'm running the Organic Data Task Force as part of the Organic Value Chain Roundtable that we've had for the last couple of years, co-chaired by the government. And getting organic data is quite challenging. So this is a role that we have to take on in order to provide it back to the industry. So just to kick it off again, to give you a sense of organic, I'm sure you've all seen these 2 logos. The Canada Organic logo is the one with the beautiful red leaf, and the US logo, but those are the 2 most commonly seen organic indicators on organic packaging that you will be familiar with. And what we do is try to chart how are we doing in growing sales. So we started charting this really around 2012, but we wanted to kind of give you what's the most recent numbers. We've had about a 28% growth since 2017 when we did our last Nielsen studies. So we're now at 6.936 billion. And that is our Canadian statistic, making us the 6th largest organic consumer market in the world. And when you team us up with the United States, who's the #1 organic consumer market in the world, 50% of all sales happening in North America makes us the largest trading region, of course, for organic products globally. Also, just to see that our market share, of course, is growing because, you know, there's a lot more organic products. I'm sure you've all seen on the market. Every trade show that we go to, like SIAL, we're seeing hot, new, cool products coming to market. So we're now at a 3.2% market share, up from 2.6% in 2017. And just this is our brand new consumer study where we really wanted to look at who are organic consumers and how are things shifting. We started looking at organic consumer statistics back in 2016. And back then it was millennials were the largest. Well, now the even younger, the centennials are now become the largest consumer market happening on our demographics. And what's very interesting is we can see as people are younger going to older, the numbers decrease. So the next generation really of centennials, millennials, exennials, Gen Xers really are those that are pushing forward. And probably what I would say out of this is that the Gen Xers, like myself, well, we raised children and now they're becoming consumers. And it's really interesting to see how people being raised with organic in their own have now become primary consumers of organic. And people always ask, well, how's that possible? They have no money, but a lot of them live at home still. So they're buying their $5 organic frappuccinos happening all the time. We also wanted to look at, was there dietary or religious reasons why people were choosing organic perhaps? So we actually built that into our study this time, and 78% of organic shoppers didn't say that they had any specific, vegetarian or kosher needs or what have you. So most of the organic consumers out there don't deem themselves to be a vegetarian or vegan or with specific dietary restrictions. This is just a preference for them to choose organic. And this is no surprise, fruit and veg is the largest product categories. But where we've seen a huge amount of growth is meat and poultry has grown significantly since the last time that we did this study in 2017. So we're seeing a lot more growth of the meat and poultry category than we have in the past. 66% of Canadians are purchasing organic products weekly. That number has not changed. But what has changed a little bit, and I do wonder if this is because of COVID, our statistics used to say that anybody earning over 100,000 or under 40,000, they were pretty much purchasing at the same level. And it was very interesting because people always are talking about organic might be a little bit more pricey, etc. But our previous study from 2016 and 2017 didn't show that there was any divide amongst income levels. Now, we just tested in August, and you can see that more people that are earning higher income are doing a higher amount of organic consumption. So I'd love to keep testing this just to see if this is a blip because of COVID and people losing jobs and the economy and a little bit of fear. Why I'm particularly interested in that is because we did another study during the height of COVID, right when it was kind of first kicking off, and 77% of consumers polled said that they thought that organic was more important than ever and they would not be giving up organic, particularly in the middle of a health pandemic. So it's very interesting to see. This was a couple months after we did our last survey, and let's keep our eye on that. University educated is more likely to purchase organic, and as well as college and high school are pretty much in the same. A little divide in regards to gender, females and males. So we're seeing a lot more male shoppers going out there and picking up organic goods just as much as females. So our food service numbers, now this is something that I imagine is going to change. We did this study in 2017. It was the first food service study ever done. And we were at 555 million. And I wish we could afford to test this again this year, because I'm sure with the effect of COVID affecting all the different restaurants and places we would go for tourism, etc., I'm sure that this number may have come down, although there are still a lot of takeout services that everybody quickly pivoted to. So, but at that point, it was 555 million. Let's get into a bit of international trade, because a lot of what Stefan is going to talk about is essentially the international side of opportunities and what's happening with the economy. So the data that I'm showing here is based off of HS codes that the federal government, Statistics Canada, tracks. And unfortunately, the numbers are extremely limited. For imported products, the federal government, they track about 45 codes, and for exports, they only track 14 codes. So that means there's lots and lots and lots of sales that are, but just to give you a sense of what is tracked, and we do have some detailed statistics on it, and just to look at, there was a blip in international exports in 2018. It went down quite significantly. Of course, we did have a lot of trade challenges, I would say, happening in 2018. There was a report of GMO wheat that pretty much halted wheat trade with Japan and Korea for quite some time. We've all heard about the US trade tariffs that have come out, etc. So it's quite interesting to look at quite the blip that happened there, but it looks like we're back up to around the 2019 or the 2017 rates. And again, imports have continued to go up and up and up. Just to get into a little bit more on the import side of things, as part of our work that we do, we think it's pretty important for us to track the amount of imports that are coming in, as well as the exports, but particularly imports, as we look to develop a local food system. And so we've been working in discussions with a large group of different government departments to try and see how we could actually track imports coming in and how much that might displace a Canadian opportunity for producers in Canada. And last year in April, so April 2019, it was announced by Canadian Food Inspection Agency that they would start tracking every single product that is organic to come into the automatic import registry system. And so it's thousands and thousands of product codes that need to be updated into their system. It will be monitored at the border, and here is the list on your screen of everything that they essentially are going product category by product category. So they estimate that they will be finished incorporating all the codes by spring of 2022. And another big reason why this is going into place is to make sure that any of the equivalency arrangements that we have with other countries, that we recognize each other's organic regulatory systems, that the proper paperwork is coming into the country to make sure that everything is compliant with the Canadian organic regime. So this is another reason. Besides the statistics and us getting a sense of it, we also want to make sure that there's more compliance tools. For export tracking, again, very limited. I know just from, two of our members of Canada Organic Trade Association that they themselves do over 400 million in exports. So it is a very challenging number to see it be so low, because I know that it's just so limited in its data. But we run a program that helps facilitate export, which of course is another reason why we partner with Export Development Canada. And just last year alone, we recorded $15 million in sales just for, I think it was 7 companies of the programming that we offered them. So this data is limited. We are looking for solutions on how we can get more holistic data done by the federal government and or any other method. But for now, we'll just have to, keep tracking it through our own methods. Just to highlight, when I had mentioned the organic equivalency arrangements, we have systems in place so that certification bodies don't have to run all over the world following a supply chain to be able to actually certify the final end product. So before we had equivalencies, you could be growing cocoa in Costa Rica and you want to bring that up to Canada and make it into a hot chocolate powder. Well, that means that that certification body from Costa Rica would have to certify it and then come up to Canada, and or a Canadian would have to go down to Costa Rica. And it was very costly for the certification because it involved physically having to go and visit all the farms to make sure that the farms and the manufacturers all were compliant with the organic standards. So we've put in place now 6 organic equivalency arrangements that acknowledges each other's systems and standards to be as similar to the Canada organic standards. And I say that with a caveat that each arrangement is different. The most holistic one we have is with the United States, where there's only 3 areas where we call out a critical variance, and those things would have to be looked at by the inspectors. It's quite different with each one of these, but just to highlight that these are the countries in which we have it, and it really has helped to grow international trade hugely and reduce the burden of certification and the costs. I just want to thank the organic certification bodies, because the next statistics that I'm going to show you would not be possible without them collaborating with our association. They are collecting, of course, all the data from the specific farms and manufacturers that allows us to share the fact that we have about 7,500 certified organic operations in Canada right now. That is up from 7,073. So you can see, there's about 400 new companies and or farms getting certified annually. So that's significant. We're in a growth sector, that's for sure. And we just wanted to provide the statistics per province. You can see how large it is in Quebec. There is nice support systems in place for people to get certified organic. And the Quebec government has made some strong commitments towards organic agriculture in their province. Followed, of course, by Ontario, then Saskatchewan, and then it continues to decline. And just to get into how many farms are part of that 7,500, so you can see majority of the people who are certified are farmers, and again, it's grown little bit by little bit. So that was about 200 and some new certified farmers. And when it gets into the processors, it was actually a bit of a decrease on the amount of manufacturers happening from the prior year. And livestock producers, we are starting to see a few more livestock producers come into the system, which is great. So it was 810 this year, and it was an increase from 726 the year before. And you can see most of that is happening in Ontario and Quebec. Now, just to give you a quick highlight of national acreage, and then I'm going to turn it over to Stephen, because it's interesting to see how much our organic acreage continues to grow, but we cannot meet consumer demand because consumer demand far exceeds what we're growing in our own countries. So as much as these numbers are fantastic and we're seeing more and more producers come into place and manufacturers offering organic options, we are far away from being able to suit our own demand. And so you might think, well, we saw the import numbers, we're importing a lot of products. Obviously, we can't grow certain things year round, but where there is an opportunity for us to grow products year round, I'd love for us to see it, move ahead on being able to actually take advantage of those opportunities. And just to highlight that we have now reached 3% of all farms. That's our 3% is market share of all farms in Canada. So the worldwide average is 1.5% of overall farms, and we are double that. So I think we're on the right trajectory in regards to conversion of farmland over to certified organic. It does take 3 years, of course, to work towards the process and make sure that you have none of the prohibited substances on your land. But just to highlight that it is growing. So I'm going to leave it there, and we are going to take questions at the end. So I will like to now pass it over to Stephen Tapp from Export Development Canada to be able to continue on and share his information.
Actually, Tia, do you have in your presentation? Can you just keep going through?
I sure can.
Because my slides I have 3 different devices here. I've tried to log on to the other ones and got kicked out, so I'm going to have to sort of ask you to go through. But I appreciate the help, and I'm happy to have the attendance. I was a little bit sad as we were talking about SIAL before, because this is one of the big food shows I love to go to in person. So always taking home the samples and checking out the latest wares. So maybe next year when we're back in person and back hopefully at some point post-COVID, this would be a good discussion, and we could have some samples. What I'm going to do is just take a bit of a higher step. So Tia's gone into much more of the details on the data in organic trade, and I'm going to take a step back and talk a little bit more about, from the economist perspective, how we see agriculture and organic trade fitting into the overall economy, and of course, what's been happening in the last little while. So if you can just advance the slide here, I'll talk about, to contextualize this, in the global economy over the last couple of years, there have been two main shocks that the economy has been working through, and that has created adjustments and opportunities. So the next slide here, Tia, is going to show the first one we were working with before the trade wars, before COVID. So as Donald Trump came into office about 4 years ago, the tariffs that the US had against China were about 3%. And as Trump is running for re-election, they are now running around 19%. So that's been a vast increase in US tariffs on China. Of course, China has responded. And what this has led to really is a lot of uncertainty about market access on different markets. Canada has been pulled into the fray in terms of what's going on. So the tariff war is one big thing that people were dealing with even before COVID. And if you go to the next slide, I'll show you some of the reactions that we're seeing. One of those, given the market uncertainty for exporters in Canada overall, has really been looking for this diversification push to the two biggest markets that we sell in overall in the US and in China have become more uncertain and more erratic in terms of trade policy. And so most businesses that we work with are looking to develop new markets. And this was from our survey a few months ago. And this is just reporting that about 50% of exporters have actually successfully been able to get to a new market. And that's not something that we had entirely expected. We saw an increase before during the NAFTA renegotiations of some worries there. But I would say one of the positives that's come out of the trade war has been Canadian companies looking for new markets and actually successfully reaching those and diversifying. So the next slide, Tia, we'll talk a bit more about the fact that we've had a lot of volatility, a lot of tariffs coming up and going down. That's actually created some opportunities for places in agriculture, like seafood is one example. So this chart here shows you seafood exports to China, and the red line is Canada, and you can see that slowly but steadily increasing. The orange line is US exports to China. And of course, the shaded area there is the tariff war. So the US imposed tariffs on China. China responded with tariffs as well on US exports of lobster, as one example. And over that point in time, you see exports of the US and Canada were the same before the tariffs. And this split here where Canada actually picked up some market share. And now in the post-tariff period, in terms of this phase one trade deal that we got in January, they're kind of back to where they were. So the good news there, at least for some Canadian exporters, we've seen as barriers go up, that's created some opportunities for our exporters. And what we're hopeful of is some of these new contracts can be made permanent, and these new relationships with new buyers can continue as we go on. And next slide, Tia, please, is of course, all of this is to dwarf the US and China trade war and overall global trade uncertainty was one thing. And then nobody really saw COVID coming. This is probably a once in a 100 years type pandemic and health crisis that we're going through right now. And we started out in China back in January. And of course, I just highlighted a couple of different countries here that you see where the caseloads are very high. These are official case counts, and there's certainly expectations that there's a lot more cases that have gone underreported. But what we saw was COVID case counts increasing, and then containment measures were being used by governments. And as caseloads came down, we started opening back up. And so we'll see that in the data. But one point just to make now is, of course, with more students returning to school and bars and restaurants that were open earlier, there are big worries and big concerns about a second wave happening. We're seeing this not just in the UK and in Europe, the rest of Europe, but in southern US states and in Canada as well. People are worried about numbers of kind of spiraling back out of control. So COVID has been the big shock. And this is looking like it's getting worse in September. Next slide, please, Tia. So what are the prospects for recovery in this outlook? We'll go to the next one here. And what we've tried to do is similar to what Tia's done, although your work is much harder and much more important, I think, in terms of developing measurements to track at detailed HS codes, what trade is going on. We've kind of had a similar reckoning with our statistics at a higher economic level, where in the past we've been waiting a couple months to get data from StatsCan. And people have noticed through COVID that there's a lot more data sources that are available in real time. The COVID series is one example where you can sort of update that on your desktop on a daily basis and refresh case counts on that. We have financial market data that we put into this, looking at oil prices and stock markets and a variety of other things like Google mobility data and the like, which we hadn't seen back in the financial crisis. But all that to say is we've put some effort into tracking overall economic activity in Canada. And what you can see quite clearly is if you compare to where we were before COVID, in March and April, we had very severe lockdowns that started in the middle of March and then kind of spread throughout the country. And during that point in time, when you add up the different indicators that we have here, we estimate that there's been about a 45% drop to the bottom, which was the end of April, start of May. And so that was the hard part. That was the people being closed inside their houses and activity being restrained significantly. On the other side of that, through to May and June was the reopening phase. And we saw a partial, but not complete rebound there, but pretty quick in terms of the down and pretty quick. And I think actually much faster than most economists expected. We didn't fall as much as some people worried about. We've come back faster than people thought. But the bigger issue now is that if you look through July and August through the summer and the data that we have now just into September, we've really seen kind of a flattening out of that. So we did get a boost as some people went back to work and some businesses opened up. But that was supported very heavily by government policy, and it seems to have lost steam and is slowing down right now. So we have seen, again, a faster recovery than we'd expected, but this seemed to be losing steam, and worries that if the government pulls back on stimulus and other measures, that the economy will slow even further. Next slide. So that's just sort of where we're at in the recovery. One of the things that we've been happy to see on the overall Canadian trade side, at least on the merchandise, so this is just overall goods trade, we've seen a very big difference in this V shape, where we had 2 or 3 months of very bad trade data, and we've come back very quickly. On the right-hand side of this chart, you can see the services trade data, which is really capturing what happened with the border closures internationally. And so things like tourism and travel have essentially stopped. They're down about 70–80%. And so we've seen that L shape where it goes down and hasn't come back yet and won't come back until borders are reopened. Next slide, please. So in this tumultuous environment where we've seen a lot of volatility, we would say that agriculture is the one area on net is a big sector that's benefited, as people are still eating and still consuming. They're changing the way that they do that, but this is one area we've actually seen a boom in activity and a big shift around. So Tia, if you can show the next slide here, I'll talk through a little bit about what we've seen, at least on the agriculture side. If you compare when COVID started, which is the shaded area there through March, you can see that there was actually a boom or an increase in activity for agriculture exports. On the other hand, we saw this big drop off in a lot of other categories. The next slide, I think, is going to show you the very large differentiation we've had. So food exports have been growing. That's that top red line there, the thick line at the top. So that's been the area where exports have picked up. Consumer products, consumer spending has come back quite quickly, and we have very accurate and updated data on that, which suggests that consumers were locked in their houses but still spending money online. And then as you work your way down, you see some of the other industries like energy side, aerospace and autos, where there have been very big hits and some rebounds on things like autos. So just to say, there's been a wide variation by industry, a wide variation in terms of country impacts, and a wide variation depending on where people are in the income spectrum, from low wages being hit hardest to high income earners who are essentially sitting with money piling up in their bank accounts and nowhere to spend it right now. Next slide. Thank you. So in terms of the outlook and opportunities, this is a sector, as I mentioned, there were big changes underway for things like oil and gas, worries about the future there in airlines and aerospace. But I would say organics and agriculture in general are one area where we have just seen continued growth, which has been better than the rest of the economy. So the next slide here is going to just take a bit of a look back to say that if you go back 20 years or so, and again, we compare agriculture and others, agriculture has been a growing share of exports. So it used to be around 6%, and now it's doubled its share to closer to 12%. This has been an area where, as we've had some challenges on things like motor vehicles or others, this has been definitely a bright spot. And the next slide here, Tia shows you drilling down a bit more closer to the organic. So using data which Tia and her group have compiled, which is very useful for us. What you can see is, the economy has obviously taken a very large hit this year, and the economy has been slower growing during some of these tariff wars and slowing impacts of global growth. But the organic sector is kind of this straight line, and the area where demand from health conscious consumers is going to be a tailwind for some time. So estimates there that you've got about close to $7 billion in the domestic market this year. And so you see, even if the overall economy is taking a massive hit, organic sales have continued. So we've seen, you know, very strong growth, and we, if anything, expect all these trends to just continue despite COVID. So next slide there, Tia, if you could. And this is our export forecast, differentiating again the ag versus the overall. We think agriculture is going to do a bit better. But in the short term, what COVID has done, people are still eating, obviously, and they're eating much more, shifting away from food services, much less in restaurants. And the companies that we've seen that have been able to market direct to consumers, either through their own websites, Facebook, or other targeted online ads, they have been able to make up for what they've lost in food services. They've made up through groceries on the retail side, or through just direct to consumers. And that's a trend that we think people, as Tia said, we're not necessarily giving up organic. It's something which I don't think people necessarily view as a necessity, but something that more or less is in line with their own view of their preferences, their brands, and what they want to consume. So we don't see, you know, that changing other than for the maybe in the lower income side where people don't have the disposable income. But in terms of demographics that Tia talked about, you've got higher income, higher educated people. Their preferences are very much in line with this health conscious lifestyle, and they're going to keep spending their disposable income on this. And so the second bullet there is really looking at, well, we're in this environment where we've had, you know, trade wars, or we've had a COVID shock, but we think the underlying market fundamentals are really strong. We think that over the long term, you know, prices can continue to be higher, and price growth can be strong. I think with the retail distribution markets or channels are starting to increase. And on the production side, as Tia is showing, we're starting to see more and more organic production. And so what that allows is the economies of scale where prices get cheaper. As you lower prices, then you can bring more consumers in. And that's sort of this virtuous cycle where we see, you know, a lot of demand, not only in the main markets in the US and in the European markets, but looking further ahead in emerging Asia, where there's just a large growing middle class and upper middle class of customers there. And of course, as Tia said, demographics are in your favor in the sense that younger people, myself and younger than myself, they're looking for these kind of labels, and they're demanding organic in terms of their first choices. Next slide there, Tia. So let me just sort of sum up, and we can get into the Q&A. I was here to provide a little bit of overview in terms of what's happening in the global economy and answer your questions on international versus domestic factors. The two main things that we see in the market now, I think, are pretty obvious, not a surprise. It's been COVID and all of our reactions and adjustments to that. The COVID shocks, which have both created a demand for Canadian exporters to start looking to new markets and successfully doing so, diversifying, you know, who they sell to, and really trying to find new consumers wherever they can really get them. So one thing coming from the COVID side, I think, has been this worry or concern about domestic production and food security, and I think that we're only going to see that increase. Supply chains have been shown to be vulnerable for some distribution networks, and so we're actually thinking there's going to be some domestic investment, particularly in ag and in organic, over the next while, as consumers want to eat locally and they want to have things produced close to where they are. So we see some upside for that. And internationally, as I just mentioned, you know, companies are looking abroad to places like India for, you know, these non-meat proteins and lentils and other sources where they can sell, where customers are increasingly demanding those. In terms of the economic recovery, which I just highlighted briefly, we've been tracking this quite closely, and we're hopeful that at least from the first wave, that the worst is behind us. We've seen a pretty strong bounce back in overall economic activity as stores reopened and as people went back to work. And we're starting to see some of that slow down now. And we're starting to obviously see worries about a second wave and whether we need more containment measures and a slowdown there. But if you go beyond this sort of next year, next two in a pandemic and where we're at, the opportunities are great, we think, for this sector. Longer term, we see a lot of demand for Canadian, that seal of approval there, Canadian organics. We think that this is a sector which is going to do quite well. So with that, Tia, I think there might be another slide or two, which is just more kind of telling you that there is some material on our website. And then after that, people can look through, people need to get a hold of me. after the session, either to chat or send me an email. The next slide there just shows my contact details through social media, or if you want to send me an email. So with that, I think that's just a bit of an overview on the global economy and where things are, and trying to fit that into to the organic slide. Let me go back to the moderator, and let's go into some Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Tia, for your time. I have some questions for you, actually, 2 questions from the attendance. Would you have any insight on some of the reasons why consumers purchase organic products in Canada?
Mm-hmm. Am I off mute? You can hear me? Yeah?
Yep.
Yes.
So we did test that, and we test that all the time. And there's number 1 reason, number 2. Number 1 is that they don't want anything to be artificial food. So, you know, there's a lot of rules in regards to manufacturing of organic products, and there's no artificial like colors, dyes, preservatives that are allowed. So that was number 1. And the second reason is that they want to avoid pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers. That could be residues on their food. So top 2 are really to do with their own self and their own body. And then next it goes into environment, that they know that it does something positive for livelihoods of farmers and the environment. So.
Another question, what is the difference between products that are labeled as organic against the ones such as poultry and eggs that claim free run?
That's a very good question, and it's very confusing because free range, free run, there's all these terms that are out there, cage free, etc. So all I can say is that organic is free run, is cage free, is non-GMO, is without pesticides, etc. And so when they're making a singular claim of that nature, it means that it's a singular claim, right? So, but organic is holistic in that it does require all non-GMO feed. It has to be outside. It can't be caged, etc. So I think that's where, you know, when I walk into a grocery store and I see a lot of cage-free right beside organic, and it's confusing, and one's so much less expensive. I think people really need to get educated on what that means and what's important to them.
Okay, I have a question for you myself. You were showing some data about the livestock, the organic livestock that we have in Canada. Is the COTA agreement has actually helped the growth of those kind of livestock, organic livestock?
You want me to be honest, right? No, it has not.
No, okay.
No, it has not. No, and I've met with trade commissioners and we've had conversations about COTA, and there's not been more, we haven't seen a significant pickup in export sales because of COTA.
Okay, good.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in on that? Not defending the agreement as a whole, which I think in other areas there have been, you know, tariffs have come down. There's been more sales, but on one side, it's the Canadian Progressive Partnership or Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the CPTPP. That's one area. I don't know necessarily on organic side, but we've seen a very big increase in sales of Canadian beef to Japan through that deal in the last year or so. It came in at the end of 2018. I'm not sure whether that's benefited as much on the organic side for beef.
I can comment.
Speak to that, but anyway,
I can comment on that.
Where I would say at least we've seen an egg pickup from a trade deal specifically, but yeah, go ahead.
The organic standard in Japan only came to include livestock products in July of this year.
Okay.
So now that we have an equivalency in place with Japan for livestock products, we may see more. But when we don't have equivalencies in place with foreign markets, or it's specific to only fruit and veg, or, you know, if it excludes aquaculture, etc., that sometimes becomes the larger trade barrier. So that's why we focus a lot on organic equivalency arrangements. So that could very well be the reason why there hasn't been a big pickup.
Okay. And I have a technical question. So is it correct then that if a product that has COR certification, it qualifies as a GMO without further certification?
Okay, so I'm going to break down the acronyms. So COR stands for the Canada Organic Regime, which is the logo I showed you with the Canada flag in it. It's the Canadian Organic Certified. So that is that is true. So all organic certified products have to actually not use GMO anything. So no GMO feed, no GMO seed, no genetic modification at all within the production standards that we've got, including your packaging. So even for people that are starting to move into more eco packaging and wanting to use like corn-based packaging, it has to be non-GMO corn because there could be genetic transference. And as for the certification side of things, I know Whole Foods was one of the largest retailers in North America that wanted everything to be non-GMO verified. They accepted the Canadian Organic Certified System as determining to prove that it is non-GMO verified. But there are two different certifications because the non-GMO is really looking at traces of GMO DNA altogether in products. And that's why you might see it on products that aren't made from a GM crop at all. So it gets to be a bit confusing. And that's why I always say, well, organic, you know what it is. It's completely holistic. I would personally stick with that because it kind of covers all the grounds.
Okay. Any other question in the audience? It should be no.
Well, I can ask one of Tia if that's allowed.
Yes.
Tia's the organic expert.
Ahead.
Tia, what area are you seeing just in the organic side? Because you guys are measuring much more detailed data. Like, what are the main areas of growth that you see, which are kind of just really off the charts, and the organic area that you think longer term is best suited?
It mimics what's happening in mainstream agriculture. It's around pea proteins. Yep. Right? It's like lentils, chickpeas, and then it gets into oats. These are the three, and wheat, of course. Those are the major product categories. So every time that we look at our analysis, I try to figure out, based off of mainstream agriculture, our numbers basically, we're leaders on all the same categories as conventional agriculture.
Okay, nice.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I have another question because we had this discussion in the past, but I'm not sure if I had of the tracks on that. And do we have only one Canadian label for organic products now? Just one?
That's a good question, and I have a murky answer. So when I first started working in organic in 1999, the federal government was in discussions with other governments saying, we don't know what your organic standard is. You've got all these logos and you accept everything. So you need to have one system, which is what became the Canada Organic Regime, and the CFIA trademarked their own one logo. Now, because we have equivalencies, we do permit the logos of our foreign countries, such as the EU and the USA. We don't make companies relabel it. So you'll see other labels on our market from the EU, from Switzerland, from the USA, etc. And that doesn't mean that it's not compliant. It means it's coming in under an agreement. So the answer is yes, but no.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any other question. So I would like to thank you both for your time and this great presentation. I have many statistics written on my paper. You cannot see it because of my background, but whatever. It was very interesting, and how we're gonna continue to develop SIAL thanks to those topics, because I believe that many, and I was very astonished by the number of countries that import products in Canada, organic products in Canada. So this is something that we, obviously we have, we have always two sides in SIAL Canada. The local, when I say national Canadian products, where we try to showcase as many Canadian products as possible, and the international offer, due to the number of immigrants that we have, the ethnic products that we consume every day in Canada as well is very high. So it's two sides, but at the end of the day, we are here for a common objective to have the healthiest product as possible for the Canadian population. So Tia, Steven, thank you for your time. I would just say to the audience that Tia is still our organic expert. So you can see, you can meet her to our stand to the SIAL Network Expertise Hall. She will be there to answer any of your questions. I remind everyone of our audience that this conference will be available on our SIAL TV YouTube channel, and on the virtual show also in the replay conference and conferences section in the menu. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your support, and have a great virtual visit then. Bye.
Thank you very
Hoping
much.
to be back next year and we can do the samples.
We do. We do. We are going to come back in Toronto. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
We are going for it.
Thanks, Tia, for organizing. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.